the term self-care has trended so hard in the last few years, and that's a good thing. But it's also gotten totally co-opted and bastardized to the point that I feel like these days self-care means like, I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want and call it self-care.
Yeah.
It's almost like the sort of diet pill of emotional health, and that shit just does not work.
Why are self-care routines always self-destructive things? It's like, oh, I'm going to lay in bed until 1 o'clock, not do any of the work that I'm supposed to do, order Uber Eats because I don't feel like making healthy
for hours on end.
Yeah, and I'm just like, that's self-care for me.
It's the antithesis of self-care.
Why is that?
Well, that's why I don't like the term, because I think self-care now just means unclenching from the exhausting realities of life. And we do need to do that from time to time, right? I'm not anti-masturbating all day. Do what you got to do, right? But
Me neither.
That's not...
Dr. Emily Anhalt, welcome back to the show. So nice to have you. Right out of the gate, let's start with this. If you could magically implant one mindset shift into every person's brain that would instantly improve their emotional fitness, what would that be?
I love this question, and it's so great to be back. It's always so wonderful to see you three. If I could implement one mindset shift, it would be that each person made a regular practice of setting some time aside to lean toward their uncomfortable emotional feelings instead of away from them. So some dedicated time to feel anxious or angry or sad or excited or grateful or whatever they're genuinely feeling in that moment, because we are receiving so many messages all over the place that tells us to push aside what we feel to be able to just push forward and do what we got to do. And in my experience, when there is time to actually feel it and to be a little uncomfortable, we get stronger. Similar to how if you work out and you're a little physically uncomfortable, you're going to get physically stronger. The same is true with our emotional life.
We also have so many tools to help push it away. Like tools in quotation marks. Like it's so easy to feel a certain way and then to be like, I wonder what's going on the Instagram Reels.
100%.
Yeah, I wonder what's that fitness? Because like I'm fit, I'm super fit in that world.
In Reels, you're real fit.
Yeah,
I was going to say pushing it away feels better though, right?
Well, I mean,
in the short term.
Yeah, this is fitting because so the last time we had you on the show, it was the 20th Feel Good Friday episode that we had done in the thick of COVID back in 2020. And we were talking about emotional fitness. And, I guess for folks who are maybe newer to the podcast, what is emotional fitness?
So emotional fitness is this ongoing proactive practice of working on your mental and emotional health. So just like physical fitness is a proactive way to work on your physical health, emotional fitness says, hey, instead of waiting till shit hits the fan and you are really struggling emotionally, what does it look like to work on your mental and emotional health a little bit every single day so that you're actually strengthening your emotional muscles and you're better equipped to handle the inevitable difficulties that life is going to throw at you.
Sounds uncomfortable to do that type of work. Like I remember somebody said this to me about yoga so many years ago, where they're like, if you go into a hot yoga room and you practice stretching and going through movements for 1 hour, and then you don't go back for an entire month, then all that work that you did in the room isn't really going to land in your body. Like it might feel nice for the hour that you're doing it, but like it's not really, if you're just going out of that room and then back into normal life and sitting with a terrible posture in your chair, then you're just going back into this like sort of shitty situation. And I kind of think like when I hear you talk about emotional fitness, I think like, yeah, I kind of do that. Like I was mentioning before we started recording that I've been going to therapy. And
how long did that take? We are wow, 4 minutes into the recording.
And I've been going, like I started going every 2 weeks at first, and then it was every 4 weeks, and now it's every 6 weeks. And I feel like, oh, that is really helpful when I am in therapy. But like, how do I do this on a daily basis? Like that seems a lot harder.
Yeah. How do you go on an emotional jog whenever you want?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so first of all, I would argue if you have not been to a yoga class before and you go to a hot yoga class for an hour, it's not going to feel that good.
No.
You're going to feel like
it's really
shit,
not.
probably.
Mhm.
But when you're going regularly, it does start to feel good during, and it feels incredible after. You're able to do all kinds of other things more easily. You're less likely to get sick. There's all these benefits. So the same thing is true. When you first start emotional fitness, it kind of sucks. Like, no one wants to feel all the things they've been trying not to feel. Nobody wants to face all of the complicated things that they've been pushing away. But when you do it regularly, it actually starts to feel really good and you see the benefits ripple out. And so the idea of an emotional jog, what you're talking about is emotional fitness. How are you working on these things a little bit all the time? And that's what my entire body of work has been about. I did a huge research study to understand, what does an emotional workout look like? How do we flex our feelings? How do we break an emotional sweat every single day? And my research essentially showed that there are these 7 traits that emotionally healthy people are working out all the time. And each of these 7 things is going to be woven into your life in all kinds of ways. And in my book that's coming out, I essentially teach you, how do you create an emotional workout regimen so that you can do it a little bit every single day.
The book is actually out now. It came out yesterday. And I love how you were able to so seamlessly work the title and the subtitle into that last answer. Flex your feelings, train your brain to develop the 7 traits of emotional fitness. I mean, firstly, congratulations. Very exciting to release a book.
Thank you so much.
Must be a shitload of work. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it turns out it's a lot
bunch
of work.
that would require maybe a lot of emotional fitness throughout the process. I guess, like, you know, before we get into the nitty gritty of, and you know, I would love to hear about the specifics of these like 7 traits of emotional fitness. But you know, we talk about mental health on this show quite a bit. We're always trying to have at least like one conversation that pertains to mental health at least once a month on the, you know, on our release schedule. And I feel like since we started the podcast about a decade ago, the ways that we think about, or the ways that we kind of talk about or view mental health or emotional health has shifted quite a bit. And like, you know, shifted like on a spectrum of like up and down over the last decade.
Yeah, we used to shit talk therapy all the time in the beginning.
Not quite.
And now we all go.
Now look at you.
You know, I think that those shifts come by the way that we are navigating through the world and the things that are happening at a current period of time, right? So when you look at like when we first met and had you on the show during COVID, that's a time where like looking at things that your emotions, looking at your mental health, you know, is very different from the ways we would have been looking at that maybe a year prior to that.
Right.
And you know, the way that we're kind of going through the world today, there's a lot of really shitty things going on in the world, and sometimes it feels really heavy and it feels really hard. So I'm curious to know from you right now, the way that the world feels, the way that you are seeing the world, especially after having written this book. What are the ways in which we think about mental health and emotional health that are not working for us?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned an interesting thing, which is the conversation about mental health has really opened up and increased, which is wonderful. I mean, in a way that the term self-care has trended so hard in the last few years, and that's a good thing because it's spreading awareness. People feel they have more permission to think about it, but it's also gotten totally co-opted and bastardized to the point that I feel like these days self-care means like, I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want and call it self-care.
Yeah.
You know, and it's almost like the sort of diet pill of emotional health. It's like, oh, yeah, this is important. Here's the quickest, easiest way to do it. You don't even have to get up your couch. And that shit just does not work. If it worked, that's what everyone would be doing. And that's what I'm seeing kind of in the mental health industry now, is a lot of easy solutions for really complicated problems. And that's just not what works. And so that's my biggest issue, is I want people to understand, look, if it were an easy thing to do, you would have done it already. I wish that's how it worked, but it doesn't. So you kind of have to gear yourself up to actually do the work.
It's funny how like when something comes into the zeitgeist and such a massive number of people are now hearing about a term or thinking about a thing, and the at the sort of like foundational level of it, it's like, yeah, that's amazing. But then it just provides this like breeding ground for people to like take advantage of it in all these different ways and to say
make
like,
money. And,
it's like, the stock market is a really complicated place and finance is a really complicated place. There's no shortages of books. I was at my parents' place yesterday, as we were talking about before the show, and I saw a book on my dad's like old bookshelf that they never touch anymore. And it was
The Art of the Deal.
It was like, The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump. It was like how to make $1 million in the stock market automatically.
Oh shit.
And it's like, clearly that book has zero value. It like, I don't need to even scratch the surface to know that it has zero value, because
or your dad just didn't read it.
Or you did, yeah, that's right.
How do you know?
It's one or the other.
Did you ask him?
But it's like, it provides this breeding ground for people to come in and go like, hey, I can make a buck off of making people think that they can do this with almost no effort.
Right.
Totally.
And the
whatsoever.
influencer culture right now is just insane. There are just so many people who have no idea what the hell they're talking about out there saying, here's exactly what you should do. And I've already diagnosed you with ADHD and I have never met you. And I think people just have to be cautious and careful. And I applaud anyone who wants to start the emotional fitness journey for sure. But be wary, because there are a lot of people who are trying to sell you some bullshit. And we have to be thoughtful about what we do.
It's so like, it's when I remember we had this revelation when we were talking to you the first time about like this idea of mental fitness and a mental gym, and like the analogous nature of the way that we take care of our emotional and mental health in the similar way that we take care of our physical health. And it feels like such a revelation. It felt like such a revelation when I heard it. But then like when you just scratch the surface of it, it's like, of course. It's like, all of these things that we're talking about, yes, you could do it once, and maybe when you do it that one time, you're like, it makes you feel a little bit better, or it was hard, but you pat yourself on the back because you did do it once, but then you don't do it for a while, and you actually don't like integrate any of that into it, and you revisit it a month later or 2 months later or whatever. But the reality of like anything that is truly worth doing, or any fruit that can bear from like any dive into anything that you want to get better at, has an inherent zone of discomfort that comes with that. And you need to be able to work through that and be with that to realize the fruit that comes with that thing.
But why are self-care routines so, like, the way that people typically tend to think of them, like always self-destructive things? Like when I think of like, when I'm like, oh, today I'm going to have a self-care day, it's like, oh, I'm going to lay in bed until 1 o'clock and not do any of the work that I'm supposed to do and order Uber Eats because I don't feel like making healthy
for hours on end.
Yeah. And I'm just like, that's self-care for me. And like, and it's almost like this, like,
and then at the end, you just feel so shameful.
Of like, all the responsibilities that I have, I'm actually not going to do any of that. And I'm calling that self-care. But actually, like, when I think of it, it feels self-destructive.
It's the antithesis of self-care.
Why is that?
Well, that's why I don't like the term, because I think self-care now just means unclenching from the exhausting realities of life. And we do need to do that from time to time, right? I'm not anti laying around. I'm not anti masturbating all day. Do what you got to do, right? But
Me neither.
That's not ultimately what's going to make you emotionally stronger. And so I think, we need the self-care, we need the lazy days, but that's not what's going to move you toward ultimately the life that you're going to want to live if that's all you're doing.
And so with all that, then, I mean, obviously it's like the inverse, but what is the inverse? Like, how should we be thinking about our emotional fitness and our mental well-being?
So it's a few things. One, it's get ready to be a little bit uncomfortable. So the first of the 7 traits is mindfulness, which I define as the ability to become more comfortable being uncomfortable. And the reason it's the first trait is because all the other traits are going to be a little uncomfortable. So if you're not willing to feel that feeling, you're not going to be able to do them. It's the same thing as, if you get on the treadmill and you say, all right, I'm only going to walk until this is at all uncomfortable, and then I'm going to stop. You're not going to get better at running or walking, You have to push yourself a little bit. So that's one. The next thing, again, is be proactive about it. It's so much easier to prevent emotional issues than it is to fix them. And so if you wait, again, until you're really struggling, then you're just in crisis management mode. And it's the same thing as like waiting until you have the flu and going to the gym then. Like, No, you need to kind of rest. And then when you're at baseline, then you can go to the gym. You can get stronger and you're going to be less likely to get the flu later because your body has the strength that it needs to fight off viruses, etc. So that's another important part. And then
just in those first two alone, it makes me think. It reminds me of Jarrett. You said once that like your therapist told you that you should like lean into watching like sad movies.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, I think of like, is being uncomfortable and is being proactive about it, is that as simple as like listening to a sad song and feeling the feelings that come with that? Or okay.
Especially if you're a person who has trouble accessing that kind of feeling. So the thing about emotional fitness is it's not one size fits all. What's a little uncomfortable for one person might be really uncomfortable for another, or might be totally comfortable for a third person. So yeah, if you're a person who was taught that you're not supposed to cry and you're not supposed to be sad and you're supposed to just push forward, and so now those feelings feel really far away, then yeah, putting on a sad movie or a sad song and letting yourself feel those feelings and cry and do whatever you need to do, then yes, that's emotional fitness, because you are leaning toward your discomfort instead of away from it. And you will, over time, notice that you have that sadness push its way to the surface in less destructive ways, because you're actually giving it air to breathe. You're giving it an opportunity to be seen and felt.
I know you've listed a couple. I would love to, if you could. So this is kind of a two-parter. The first one, just rifle off all 7 of the traits.
Yeah. So the 7 traits are mindfulness, curiosity, self-awareness, resilience, empathy, communication, and playfulness.
Okay. Now, I'm curious to know, out of those 7 traits, out of those 7 traits, which one do you personally struggle with the most? And how do you personally work on that?
So I personally struggle the most with mindfulness because being uncomfortable is no fun. And especially physical discomfort, I'm really bad at sitting with. I was a really sick baby. I was super sick as a kid. And I'm sure my tiny little brain felt like I was never going to get better. And so I didn't develop trust that I could handle it and that it would be okay. And so now when I'm even a little physically uncomfortable, I am doing everything I can to change it. If I'm cold, I'm immediately going inside, even if I had fun. You know, I don't eat spicy food. Like there's all these physical things that I just don't tolerate well. And so
like,
a lot of my work
tickled?
has been, no. Yeah, no way.
Okay.
I can't tolerate that at all.
Yeah.
That's a good example.
I mean,
99%.
Anyone who's tolerating that, or even more than tolerating that, I think maybe
There's something else.
there's something going on there.
Yeah. So I've had to challenge myself, like I purposely did start doing things like yoga. And at first I hated it. I hated it to the point that it felt almost panicky. Like, when the hell am I going to be able to get out of here? And I just noticed over time, you start to realize, okay, this isn't going to kill me. I can do it. And there's all these benefits, if I can stick with it, that are probably worth it. And you really just get better at it. We forget as adults that when you practice something, you get better at it. And that's what's true about dealing with our discomfort as you lean into it. And, by lean into your discomfort, I don't mean tolerate pain and put yourself in horrible situations. It just means sticking with it a little longer than you might have otherwise and seeing yourself get stronger over time.
It's always like, whenever yoga is such an amazing, just like general analogy to all of this, because it's this thing that blends the physical, the mental thing that we're talking about with the physical thing that we're making an analogy to, and blends them both together really well. And like that space between, like when you get into, if you get into a position, and the first 5 seconds you're like, this feels good, and then like second 6 and 7 you're like, I'm not really super stoked on this anymore. And then your mind starts going, and you're like, when are we changing position? Like, I'm expecting you to change the position. Can you change the position, please? And then they're like, 3 more breaths. And then you're like, holy shit, 3 more breaths. I cannot, this is so, but that like, that gap, like I've always thought about mindfulness as like the gap between the action and the reaction, and being able to like elongate that gap, to a point where your reaction is like authentic, rather than like too heavily influenced by like the knee jerk of whatever it is that you were dealing with, or you were being forced to kind of reckon with. And just being put in these positions over and over again where you're like forced to live in that gap physically, that sort of like demands you to be in that gap space mentally.
Is that why you don't ever hear what we ask you the first time we ask you? Because you're in that gap.
I'm in the back rooms, man. I'm in the in between.
Explains so much.
It is funny though, like when you talk about like this idea of like feeling self-aware, feeling enlightened, yet at the same time wanting to avoid discomfort. Like there was I remember when I was taking, Taylor, you were teaching this level 2 vinyasa class, and I started going to it. And I remember at the start of class, you said something like, all right, like listen to your body, take what you need. And about 15 minutes into class, I just laid down on the floor and I was like, this, like, I'm good. Like I'm listening to my body. Look at me. I'm so enlightened. Like everybody else is here, you know, and their ego has them and they're like trying to push through these hard poses. And I was just like, yeah, I'm enlightened. Like I'm just chilling. But really, like, I was avoiding the discomfort. Like, I was just totally and thinking like I was doing a good job by like not.
I came over to you and I went, Brian, this is not what you need.
Yeah, and I was snoring and you kicked me. And I woke up. But like, it's interesting because like I feel like oftentimes, and even going to therapy, it's like I'm in my session and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm like rationalizing and all of my emotions and thinking about this thing. I'm like, okay, cool, I got it. But sometimes I use this as a tool to avoid the discomfort of like really leaning into those feelings and just feeling them. But it's so much easier when you don't. It feels easier to like avoid that discomfort. But what I'm hearing is that it's actually important to lean into it.
So again, we have mindfulness, curiosity, self-awareness, resilience, empathy. What were the last two?
The last two are communication and playfulness.
Okay, right. And okay, so I would love to hear about self-awareness. Where does that fit within this, these traits? What's the purpose there of self-awareness, and how does that play into the way that we kind of view our emotional fitness?
So self-awareness is important because it's really hard to change something if you don't know about it. And the reason mindfulness and curiosity come first is mindfulness helps you tolerate the discomfort you're going to need to face to do all the rest. Curiosity helps you look at things that you have been working hard to look away from. So it's asking yourself questions, and instead of being defensive, it's being curious and trying to get to know what's behind those defenses. And what's behind those defenses is self-awareness. Once you're able to be a little less defended against that tough information, then you start to know things about yourself that you might want to change. I think that one of the most profound things I realized from my therapy is how much I was bringing about the very things I wanted to change in my life. It really felt like life was happening to me. All these things were happening to me. The wrong kinds of relationships just kept showing up. And what I realized in therapy is like, oh shit, I am the common factor in all of my life circumstances.
Right.
And there are all kinds of little ways that I am actually invested in things not going right. And until I understand that, it's really hard to change it. Because there are all kinds of things that worked for you when you were little that set what kind of person you are in life that aren't working for you anymore. And until you understand why you did those things originally and can look them straight in the eye and let them go, it's going to be really hard to do them differently now. So self-awareness is this powerful thing. It's like cleaning the lens of the camera that you see the world through. Suddenly it comes into focus and you're like, oh shit, I've just been getting into the wrong kind of relationship over and over because it's familiar, because I'm trying to figure something out. Now that I know that, is that the kind of relationship I want to keep getting in? Or do I want to try something different?
I feel like the way that you've ordered these sort of helps people to maybe avoid this in this question that I want to ask, where you get to self-awareness, and the way that you explained it, that like it breaks things down and allows you to be self-aware, like in that ordered process, as going through these as a step-by-step process. Once you get to self-awareness, you've kind of like laid the groundwork to be that way.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, like, something that occurred to me.
Can you skip the first two steps?
Well, something that occurred to me was that, like, if I was sitting here like in a vacuum and I just went, I want to be, and I thought I didn't know about these other steps, and I thought I want to try to be more self-aware. Do you find, or what are your thoughts on what I imagine can sometimes be a blurry line between like self-awareness and like maybe like negative self-talk or critical thinking, where you think that you are being self-aware because you're saying like, oh, I just did this thing and I shouldn't do that thing because because I can tell that it pissed that person off when I did that. And so I need to be like self-aware to not do that thing.
Dude, you're in my head right now. Like I'm like, oh, God, I'm such an asshole, and like, that's my
like beneficial self-awareness versus negative self-talk.
Yes,
that's not really real.
Yeah.
If you were to,
sorry. Okay. Never, I take it back. So yeah, never mind. Cause I am an asshole.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So, essentially, like, in short, is there sometimes a blurry line between, beneficial self-awareness that is sort of like, for all intents and purposes, objective, versus like negative self-talk where you're telling yourself that you're being a certain way and you try to alter your behavior because of kind of like the egotistical external factors that you are perceiving.
Right. So the self-awareness kind of is that. It's the realization of, oh, something's not working here. And I think it's a very common thing that our first reaction to that is to blame ourselves. But that is why after self-awareness comes resilience and empathy. Because once you know that something's working, you have to move forward and you have to be kind, not only to other people, but to yourself about that thing. And that's what ultimately leads to change. So first you have to see it. First you have to know it exists. You have to admit it to yourself. Then you have to decide what to do with it. And so that's why self-awareness comes early, but empathy for ourselves is a really powerful and difficult thing. And the reason why it's so difficult is that it is somehow more tolerable to believe that we are bad and at fault for things in the world than it is to feel like we're just powerless in a world that's going to do bad things. And so really young, many of us learn to blame ourselves for anything that's not good in our life, and we will carry that message with us into adulthood. And so empathy is one of the traits because at some point you have to take a deep breath and say, maybe I was just doing the best I could with the circumstances I had. And maybe I'm still doing the best I can, but now that I see that these things aren't working, maybe I can do them differently. And maybe I can forgive myself for not having done them differently up till now. And maybe I can be kind both to myself and to other people for the fact that we're all just managing to live in this 7-layer dip of insanity that is life. And that now that we know better, we can do better. Kind of thing.
Yeah, that so something that's sort of in line with that I've found really helpful, especially as of late, both for the way that I think about or talk to myself internally, but also the way that I view others, and whenever conflict might arise with somebody else, is like seeing myself or seeing them as as a 5-year-old version of myself or a 5-year-old version of them,
Totally.
and especially with, so I was joking that I wasn't joking. I do actually like say to myself that I'm an asshole all the time. But I've had a lot of like anger management issues throughout my whole life. And so like one tiny example of that is road rage, like just totally losing my mind on the road when people are do whatever, even the slightest thing. What are you guys nodding?
I've never noticed that. Ever.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But like, it is. Hey, it was. I'll say that it was.
And he's working on it.
But one thing I've found really helped is like when that person cuts me off or when that person does whatever, like to see them driving their car as a 5-year-old.
Like, why is a 5-year-old driving?
A, it's hilarious, and B, it immediately sort of like de-escalates the situation in my mind, because it's like, they're just a little boy.
I hope you're doing that for yourself too. Like an emotional push-up for you, an emotional push-up you could do is every time you catch yourself saying, I'm an asshole, it's to imagine you calling your sweet little 5-year-old self who's just trying so hard to make shit work in this world, being like, you're such an asshole, and instead being like, you know what? I'm not an asshole. I'm an imperfect person doing my best. Maybe I can do better.
Yeah. Okay. Emotional push-up. I like that. That's cool. Give me, let's break that down. What is, What is that? What's an emotional push-up? And how can people figure out what their emotional push-ups are?
Sure. So an emotional push-up is any small emotional exertion that puts you just a little bit outside of your comfort zone so that you can grow. So if you think about what a physical push-up is, it's this little physical exertion. If you only do one, you're not going to get stronger. But if you do some every single day, not only are you going to get better at doing push-ups, but you're going to get stronger in other ways. You're going to be able to carry your groceries and pick up your kid, and you're going to get sick less often. So there's all these benefits. So an emotional push-up is essentially figuring out what is a small way I can lean toward my emotional discomfort just a little bit so that I can grow. So it might be anything from, like you said, talking to yourself a little differently. It might be apologizing for a mistake. It might be putting your phone away 2 hours before you go to bed instead of scrolling right up until you close your eyes. It might be next time you want to take a drink, you pause and say, am I taking a drink because it'll enhance my life in this moment or because I'm trying to escape something in this moment? It's anything that helps you move toward a healthier version of yourself just in that moment. And when you do them every single day, not only will doing them get easier, but everything will get better in your life. Your relationship to yourself and others will improve. You will just see this crazy ripple effect.
Okay, so I love that. The one thing that pops up for me after hearing that and hearing all of this really is, and I think this is something that I struggle with, but I think it's also something that I think this is universal. I think we all struggle with this because if we didn't, then the world would be a much different place to live in. All this makes sense, and all this like I'm going, yes, right, yes. This is good. These are good things. The struggle that I have is remembering. It's like the remembering that I got to do my push-ups today. Because I hear this right now, it's going in one ear, and when this conversation's over, it's going to have fallen out the other ear, and I'm not going to remember until I see your book on the bookshelf, or your episode drops, and I go, I didn't.
Also, just to piggyback on that too. I mean, it's especially difficult in the moments when you're emotionally dysregulated.
Totally.
Yeah, but again, that is because this is not a habit in your life. So there are a lot of people who don't exercise who are like, I just, the whole day flies by and I've just forgotten. And then there are people who are like, I set an alarm every single day and I do my physical exercise. And then at a certain point, you don't need to set an alarm anymore because your body starts to be like, hey, it's time to exercise. Or you get to the point that when you don't exercise, you feel like shit. And so you're almost excited about doing it. The same is true with this. You have to at first put things into place to make sure it happens. So put it on your calendar, set an alarm, have an accountability buddy, decide what your emotional fitness practice looks like, whether it's just 5 minutes of the day that you let yourself feel things, or maybe you make a list of things you want to get a little better at and you do one every single day. And I promise over time, you don't have to force it as much. It starts to just become a part of your daily habit. And the thing about emotional push-ups too is it's not your experiences, but your reflection on your experiences that leads to change. So after you've done an emotional push-up, then you should ask yourself, how did that feel for me? Was it as uncomfortable as I thought it was going to be? Do I feel any better now? Do I think I could do it again? Could I push it even farther next time? And that is what over time will help you get stronger and stronger.
It's funny how,
do you think that Jeremy and I go to the gym together every morning? And I'm just wondering if we should start in between sets, do emotional fitness sets. So like I could spot you by changing the music on your phone to be really sad.
Yeah.
And then you could just cry on my shoulder. And so like you'll go from pump up to like sad song.
Yeah, and then I start crying with doing bench, and it just falls on my chest. And,
or you get sad strength.
Yeah.
Which everybody knows is really intense.
Right. You could even have as simple a thing as at the end of your workout, you each share one thing that you're grateful for that day. And I know that sounds a little bit trite or whatever, but it's actually quite powerful to bring yourself back to something that is working in your life and that feels good. And then you might also share one thing that you want to strengthen a little bit in your life that day. Like emotional fitness, emotional push-ups don't have to take a long time. I know earlier you were saying that you'd like to journal, but you just can't really do it. You don't find yourself doing it. I'm the same way. I don't love journaling, but every day I just write one line about my day, about what I did or how I felt that day. And I've now been doing that for about 7 years. And so I have a record for the past 7 years of how I have felt on this day. for
Wow.
7 years in a row. And I've started to notice patterns and all kinds of interesting things. And that came from just every day, I literally would take 20 seconds to write out one thing that I felt that day. So that was
Wow.
my emotional push-up that I got started. And now it's just part of my routine. I don't even have to
Do you
think
ever
about
go
it.
back and read, you know,
yeah.
like,
Every day I read everything that I've written on that day over the past 7 years. And it's so
Whoa.
wild. It's like, oh
Whoa.
shit, I feel sad at this time of year. I didn't realize that. I wonder why that is. I should think about that. Or, oh, I'm really creative, when we set the clocks so that I'm getting more sun. I should set up more projects around this time because I seem to have more energy, things like that.
Well,
Cool.
we should take that data, and I love data analysis,
data.
and we should that should be your next
Pro
book.
data.
We'll just go in and we'll analyze all of that, and
Well,
Yeah,
because
that's
also
really
our brains
interesting.
have a really selective memory. So people who are struggling with depression, it's a really common thing that they feel like they've always been depressed and that they've always will. And so I'll notice sometimes I'll be typing like everything sucks. I'm just not enjoying any of the things I would normally enjoy. And I'll look back, and a week before I'll have written, today was such an incredible day. I had such a great time with my friends. And I'm like, oh shit, I haven't always felt like a piece of crap in this world. That's good. Okay, so maybe I'll get back to good again. So there's just something powerful about having a record.
It's funny how like over the past few years of having kids, and especially now that I've got a 3-year-old, and like the last year has been I've had this like little buddy to talk to. And the way that kids do all sorts of things that you end up doing emotional push-ups to deal with.
Yeah, nothing more triggering than having a kid, that's for sure.
And they're like, there's lots of things where you got to like check yourself and
you ever call her an asshole?
And go, well, it's definitely an emotional push-up when I
Not
feel
to
like
her
I
face,
want to,
right?
and then go, okay, well, what's the actual way that I should respond to this? But even in ways like the way that I need to communicate to her because just the difference in like the scope of the way that we can communicate. So like I'm like always expressing how much I love her or how much I appreciate the way that she asks me questions, and like these things that I'm never going to, like, if you guys ask me a great question that makes me curious and intrigued about something, I'm not going to go, that was a really great question, Brian. Thank you for asking that. That made me think about this. But with my 3-year-old, I do that all the time because I want to reinforce in her that the things that she's doing are really meaningful to me.
I would
and
really,
she should do
but
more
I
of
would
that.
like it if you did
I
that
know,
to me.
I know, but it's funny how it's like a space for me that I didn't really set up intentionally to do this thing that I don't do enough.
Imagine doing it for yourself too. So this is one step even further, which is the next time that, let's say you get into a conflict with someone and you take a deep breath and you handled it really well. We should be like, hey, wow, I just handled that really well. I was tempted to handle that badly and I didn't. And I'm proud of myself for that. We should talk to ourselves with the same compassion that we would, a son or daughter or, child of ours. And in fact, with my patients, sometimes I'll hear them say something and I'll say, hold on, quick pause. Would you ever say that to your son? I can't imagine you would ever talk to your son like that. Can you try that again, but with the same love and thoughtfulness and compassion that you would speak to your son? And they'll try it again. And it's quite moving. Like we can reparent ourselves. We have this second chance in adulthood to treat ourselves with a little more love and kindness and compassion. And, over time, it really shifts the voice inside our head. There's a quote I love, which is, be careful how you talk to yourself because you're listening. And so if you can pause and try again, you will make change with that.
Yeah. Taylor's not, but we are. Yeah.
I feel like that's probably the single biggest door that felt like it unlocked when I started therapy was like this opportunity to redefine the relationship that I have with myself through thinking of myself as a kid, and like
we're all
giving
just
myself that love
children
that I
in
did.
adult armor. You know what I mean? Like that little version of ourselves still exists inside. And we've coded it with all of these defenses and all of these ideas about how things are supposed to be. But that little wounded, excited, imperfect, but, profound little person is still in there. And you can talk to them and you can, heal them by being kind.
The last of the 7, Playfulness. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. I mean, I think that's something that we naturally gravitate towards just by way of the conversations that we have a lot on the show, and it's kind of like a big part of the way that I think all three of us kind of move through the world. And I do think that, you know, finding playfulness in any and all things that you do, especially the things that are hard, is just so valuable and so important. How do you frame that in the book, playfulness, and how does it fit?
So there are all kinds of amazing definitions of play. One of them that I love is the idea that play functions to sustain this reality of things being real and not real at the same time. So, for example, if you think about martial arts, you're not really pretending to fight. You're actually fighting, but you're not fighting like you would be if you were in a fight out there. And this sort of real and not real space allows you to create this incredible thing. So that's one definition of play I love. But in the book, the one that I focus on is the idea of being a yes and person. Being a person that when someone comes to you with an idea, or when you have an idea yourself, you don't say, well, yes, but. You don't even just say yes, you say yes and. You meet them in the idea, you expand on the idea, and together you get somewhere that neither of you could have gotten alone. And we can yes and ourselves, right? Like the next time you say something and you think, no, that's stupid, I'm such an asshole, you can be like, wait. If that were true, then this might also be true, and this, and what if this, right? And you let yourself, for a second, stop worrying about the destination of the thought and instead just enjoy the journey of it. And the reason playfulness is last is that in a lot of ways, this is really hard to do. To really let yourself just fully unclench and play. You know, a lot of psychologists talk about how therapy is really in its entirety just teaching people how to play. It's just teaching people how to yes and their own and other people's experiences. And it's a really profound, powerful thing when you start to do it. Like all my favorite people in the world are yes and people. Yeah. You know, it's like when you say something that's kind of dumb, instead of someone calling you out, they're like, oh yeah, and what about this? And they kind of get in there with you. Those are the people you really want to be around. And I think it's hard to do until you have worked on all of the reasons we want to say no, or that we want to contradict our own selves and other people.
Have you ever taken an improv class?
Yeah, for sure. Which is what I love about, that's where yes and comes from, is improv. And improv is one of the scariest, hardest things you can do, but it's very good for your emotional fitness. I highly recommend it.
And it's very fun. Well, I mean, there's this, we're just scratching the surface. There's an entire book that is diving into all of this. That you wrote. It is available now. Where can people find the book if they want to get their hands on a copy?
Anywhere that you can find books, it's there. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, whatever you like to get your books, it's there. If you just type in Flex Your Feelings with my name, it'll come up. And one thing that I think is cool about the book is, as a therapist, I tend to be kind of careful about how much about myself that I put out there in the world. But in this book, I share my own examples of my own journey with emotional fitness. I share examples from my practice, people I've worked with, and how they've worked on their emotional fitness. So I really tried to bring the examples to life there. And I'd love to hear what people think and hear how people are breaking an emotional sweat and flexing their feelings themselves.
And how can people follow along with the work that you do outside of the book and kind of follow you?
Yeah, I am at Dr. Emily Anhalt on all the things, every social platform you could possibly imagine. I'm out there. Find me on there, and I try to post, emotional push-ups that you can be doing and, different ways of thinking about things. My real mission in life is to help take overly complicated psychological concepts and make them as digestible and easy to understand as possible. So if that sounds good to you, follow along and we can emotionally get fitter together.
Well, Sweet. Emily, you're one of our all-time favorite guests, and that has not changed. That's only increased.
You three are awesome.
It's such a fun time, folks. Get your copy of the book, Flex Your Feelings, Train Your Brain to Develop the 7 Traits of Emotional Fitness. It's available now. Go out and get your copy. You can find the link to that and all of Emily's socials in the episode description.
They should have an emotional strong man or person competition. What would that look like? What would your emotional biceps or just bulging?
Just who can continuously do emotional push-ups for as long as possible, setting the world record.
I think it's called a prisoner of war.
I want to leave. We'll leave it with this one final question. If someone who's completely new to this idea, and even just the thought of this sounds quite overwhelming, what's the easiest first step someone can take to start training their emotional fitness?
I would say think of one thing that makes you a little uncomfortable and do it. And then ask yourself how it felt and if it was really as tough as you thought. And then just to make that possible, reach out to a few people in your life, remind them that you care about them, and remind yourself that they're there. Because emotional fitness, what we say at COA is it's an individual journey, but it's a communal pursuit. So just like in the gym, you have to lift your own weight. No matter how rich you are, you can't pay someone to lift your weight for you. You have to do it. But it's a hell of a lot easier to lift weights when there are other people around who are also working out and who can spot you and who can cheer you on. The same is true with emotional fitness. We need each other. This is a hard thing to do alone. So find your people and do the journey together.
Emily, you're the best. Thank you so much. This has been
y'all
so
are
fun.
amazing. Thanks for having me.